Up here. That working for everybody?
Looks good, Rocco. We can see your starting slide.
All right. Well, I can't see anything else. So if anybody has a question or anything, just jump in. I'm just using one screen here. So welcome again to this series. I am Rocco. As Scott said, so I cover kind of the southeast Dane County, Greene, Jefferson, Rock, Walworth, Waukesha, Racine. You can see them all there. My favorite practice, I'm going to go out on a limb here and be a little different and say CP1. And the biggest reason is because that's about the only place I've seen Henslow sparrows. And you can see my little Henslow sparrow down in the corner. Best finds for me are compass plant and obviously Henslows and other grassland birds, kind of the other thing I'm into. I've seen this map a few times, just has all of our coverage areas. For those of you that are newer to Wisconsin and don't know your counties very well, like myself, this is the general area I cover. That's me down the southeast. I've seen this a bunch of times too. This is kind of what us as farm bills do. I'm not gonna spend too much time there. So today, the myth we're trying to bust is you must plant CRP early in the spring. Well, in fact, you can actually, according to NRCS standards, there are CRP practices that you could plant in any month. I was looking at a CP3A just recently that said you could plant anytime before October 1st. So getting pretty loose with the term CRP here for this fact, but there are practices that could be planted just about any time of the year. For this talk, I'm going to focus mostly on cool season grasses versus warm season grasses. So even then, we can still plant grasses just about any time except June. So you can see the planting window for cool season grasses there, April to June, August, and then again in November until fall. So that covers a big chunk of the year. Warm season grasses essentially can be planted anytime from October 20th all the way through to midsummer, just about. So it's just that little window, kind of mid to late summer. That's not a great idea to be planting warm season grasses, and we'll get into a little bit more. So just thought I'd start out with some kind of basic, almost physiology between differences between cool season and warm season grasses. So cool season grasses use what's known as the C3 pathway for photosynthesis. Warm seasons, the C4 pathway. Well, what does that mean? Well, in practice, without getting into the biology too much, C3 pathway is just more efficient at a lower soil temp and air temp, and C4 is more efficient at higher temps. So what that means for the plants, cool season grasses are more active early in the spring. They fall off a bit in the summer when the temps get warm. And then your warm season grasses get more active kind of midsummer. Cool season grasses in Wisconsin anyway, are typically introduced grasses. I say typically because there's always exceptions, similar to warm season grasses. For when we talk about them, especially in the CRP setting, we're typically talking about native plants. Cool season grasses generally sod forming. I'm sure there's examples. Well, yeah, I can think of a couple that are not. And then warm season grasses generally bunch forming. Again, these are just kind of general terms. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Some examples of some native cool season grasses would be your Canada and Virginia wild rye, which are more of a bunch grass, and June grass. And the classic native warm season grasses, this is typically what we mean when we talk about warm season grasses. Big blue, little blue, Indian grass, switchgrass, there. Some introduced cool season grasses, again, the most common players, smooth brome, Kentucky blue, and then a warm season introduced grass would be Bermuda grass, which I don't think I've ever actually seen. So what they look like, so cool season grasses on the left here, that top left, that's your classic smooth brome field. You have some, looks like Canada wild rye on the top right, Timothy grass, Kentucky blue on the bottom there. And then our warm season grasses, get a real good view of here what a bunch grass looks like. That top left there is little blue stem, some Indian grass on the top right, and then side oaks grama on the bottom there. You can really see the difference in the kind of the bunch forming and the sod forming grasses. If you look at the picture of the side oats, you can see how much bare ground there is. That much is a little weird for a native planting, but kind of get the idea of a little bit more exposed soil typically with a warm season grass. So here's just kind of a graphic representation of those kind of the dates I mentioned earlier. So you can see cool season grasses, real active in the spring. They kind of drop off midsummer when it heats up and their physiology kind of shuts down a little bit, and then another little peak in the fall. Compared to the warm season grasses, where they're dormant most of the spring, really spike up, do almost all their growth over the summer, and then slow down as temperatures fall. How does this inform our planting times? Well, cool season grasses can be planted kind of anywhere you see like the cool season grass, the activity starting to increase. So early spring, and then kind of after that real hot period in the summer, and then again in the fall. Warm season grasses, as I mentioned earlier, pretty much anytime late fall all the way through the winter, wrapping all the way around to the spring. So if we kind of lay those on top of each other, you can see there is some overlap. And then we have this little, what I like to call the danger zone, kind of that mid-June when we don't recommend anybody be planting warm or cool season grasses. What is the danger zone? So this is an area where plants, they'll germinate and start to grow, but they're not going to have enough growing season to build up enough resources to make it through the winter. So if we did plant a warm season grass kind of in this danger zone, there's a chance we get enough rain, right conditions, the seed germinates, but it only gets, a few inches tall. It can't survive a frost kill and has no energy, not enough energy built up in the roots to be able to start over again the following season. So we want to avoid that. Again, there's, late dorm season, take it through the spring. And then also one of the advantages of planting kind of in the winter is that most native seeds need to be what's called cold stratified. So just going through multiple freeze and thaw cycles to germinate. So in the wild, this happens naturally, but a lot of the native nurseries will do this to see if it needs to be done before they send it to you. So how do planners use this information to make recommendations to landowners? So all that kind of backstory is to get us to what do we do with this information? Well, the biggest thing is site prep. Site prep kind of rules everything we do, and is essentially the most important part of getting a native or cool season grass or planting to work to be successful. I would say even more so with the warm season grasses, they require just a little bit more help to get going. Cool season grasses in this area, anyway, the introduced grasses tend to be a little more aggressive. Just because of their physiology, they can outcompete the warm season grasses because they're growing early spring. They can kind of outcompete. So site prep is the biggest thing. So one of the first things we really need to consider is what will the cover be when the contract starts? So kind of the most common ones we see here, it's either a row crop, hayfield, fallow field, or just straight bare ground. So depending on what we have in the field, can tell us kind of what actions are going to be required. So if it's a row crop, you're going to need to spray it, maybe possibly more than once. Maybe need a light disking to just kind of break up some of that sod and get some exposed soil. And then, or is it bare ground? Do we not need to do anything? How long does this take? Spraying, if we have say a brome field, something that's been in what would be like a CP1 or an old hay field, could take an entire growing season to spray. Brome, we recommend typically 3 sprayings before even trying to plant into it. If it's an old hay field, could be about the same thing. Fallow field, maybe a little less, maybe grasses aren't as well established, and we can get away with a little bit less spraying. And then a disc field, if we do have to disc it, we'll likely get a big flush of seed bank, seeds that are just sitting there in the soil, expose them, get them the right conditions. They could easily flush. We may need to spray again one more time just to get everything out of there before we try to plant, especially if we're planting natives. We really don't want anything in there competing with our natives if we can avoid it. And then something like a soybean stubble field, which is kind of our our first choice if we could pick what we're planting into. Those can be seeded into straight away. They're typically super clean, not a lot of residue in the field, a lot of exposed soil. We could pretty much just get right in there and seed it right once the crops are harvested. Then what is being seeded? Like I said, we plant cool season grasses we may be able to not as much site prep required compared to like a warm season grass. Do we really need to get everything out of there? Anything that's going to compete with a warm season grass, we need to get it out to make sure that we're not just throwing, $500 seed mix on the on the dirt on the soil that's just going to be overtaken by some cool season grasses or other weeds. So I just want to go through a couple examples of stuff that we would see. There's a lot of words here. We'll just kind of try to talk through this scenario. So this example, we have a contract starting June 1st, corn grain. So it's probably going to end up with a lot of residue compared to like if we had a corn silage field, which can have a lot of bare ground. This situation, we're going to plant warm season grasses. So site bed prep, like I said, likely going to need some type of disc or other option. Disc in this situation, kind of only one. Expose some bare soil if we're going to broadcast it. If we're going to disc it or if we're going to drill it, we could possibly just drill right into that much residue. We'd like to see more bare soil if possible, but if a native drill is your only option, that would work also. If we are going to disc it, like I said, there's a chance we're going to need a spray in the spring, possibly that fall, depending when the crops come off. If we have time, if things have time to germinate before we can knock them back. So drilling, harvest to freeze up. Don't want to be drilling into frozen ground, and then broadcast. If we can get that disking done or sprayed, hopefully late spring, early summer. Just allow time to get that spray done in the spring. After that, we kind of get that flush of all the seeds that are up in the top of the soil now. Example number 2, planting. We have an October starting contract. Existing cover soybeans, cool season grass, no site bed prep. We could just throw that cool season grass down. It should do just fine. Again, planting timeline if we're drilling it. Harvest to freeze up, broadcast, harvest until thaw. So that's that would be kind of a best case scenario. If this was a warm season planting, it would be essentially the same thing. Same kind of site bed prep, and then seed bed prep, sorry, and the planting. This one gets a little tricky. Talk a little bit about this one as we go through it. I've actually seen a couple of these now. They're pretty tough. So contract starting October 1st. The existing cover is smooth brome. They've had the CP1 field. One example that I'm working with currently, it was re-enrolled twice. So now we have a 20-year-old brome field, and we want to step up to a CP2 and put some warm season grasses in the ground. So seed bed prep, we're going to need at least 3 sprayings during the growing season. Obviously, you want to spray stuff when it's growing to kill it off. If we can, with the contract not starting till October, depending on weather, hopefully we can get a spraying in that fall still, while hitting kind of the tail end of that cool season growing period. Get those, hopefully start knocking back the brome. Brome is a very robust root system. It's really hard to kill. It really needs a lot of effort to get rid of. And then ideally we would get 2 more sprayings in the following growing season. So maybe a mid-spring, early summer situation. And then we might need a light disking to expose the soil. A burn in this situation would also be very helpful to get some exposed soil, to get some soil contact, seed soil contact. And then planting timeline. This is where it gets tough. That's a lot of seed bed prep that has to happen. And with the standards for the warm season planting, it has to be planted before June 20th, I believe. So that's a lot of work to get done. Ideally, we would probably plant this in the fall, just with that much work to be done. However, when you have a contract that expired, they started the contract October 1st, they have 1 year to get that in the ground, which is where this one really gets tight. And they really need to be on top of their work, try to have that spray ready in October. Hopefully, weather cooperates, we can get something going. And this would be a time to really get whether the Farm Bill's involved or someone else at NRCS that has some experience with this, so we can try to get this landowner moving in the right direction and really letting them know that they need to get on this right away, because they got a lot of work to do to try to meet not only that June planting timeline for the warm season grass, and then our deadline, and then also just with that contract coming, having to be installed within a year. Yeah, sorry, June 30th. Warm season grass is June 30th. Sorry, it doesn't open until October 20th. So some of the solutions for this that I've come up with, kind of talking with some other farm bills, is just really trying to get on top of that spraying in the fall if we can, and then just really pushing hard to get to that June 30th deadline, and hoping the weather cooperates. So with that, conclusions for this: cool season grasses can be planted early spring, midsummer, or kind of fall winter. Warm season grasses can be planted just about any time from fall to spring, again avoiding kind of that danger zone in both of them. And the biggest one is don't seed anything in July. That's kind of, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember, don't seed anything in July. Cool season, warm season, the chance of success are extremely low. So with that, we'll take any questions. And in case you guys didn't notice in my first slide, this is actually a Henslow sparrow. There was not Henslow sparrow in that other picture. That's just what it looks like when you're trying to find Henslow sparrows in brome fields. My little bird joke for the day.
Thank you for that clarification, Rocco.
You are welcome.
I want to throw an asterisk out there too. So Rocco, a lot of the planting dates that you were talking to are true for southern Wisconsin. But just note that some of those dates do change as you climb up in the state. Okay. And so just be kind of working with your farm bill biologist for those areas. But the general trend, like that growing season and whatnot, the danger zone, it's all still the same. So very relevant.
A question for you, Scott. Britt and I were kind of talking about this. I did not realize that it was that much different up there. It makes sense. What is your warm season cutoff date? Or your can you plant later into June or July up there?
So according to NRCS standards, we stop at June 30th, just like you guys do too. Mm-hmm. And then we open up just a little bit earlier. So October 15th is when our date opens. We have planted in July in the danger zone. And it's usually, so we say that June 30th because that's what we want all our contract data to say, because that's a spot where we're really comfortable, and we being NRCS and biologists in the same. Yeah. But a lot of the years when we get close to that timeline and like there's still contracts that could be planted or we want planted, we'll be looking more at the 10-day forecast. And so we'll be comparing temperatures, we'll be looking at moisture in the forecast, making sure that if we do plant something, that it's going to get started right away. If we're looking at the 10-day in July and there's not a shot of rain, then we're going to stay true to that June 30th. But so there is some flexibility kind of in there. But it's year by year, it's week by week, it's day by day when it comes down to that. And even on the back end of that too, then like that July or October 15th, when that window opens up, like if our soil temperatures haven't dropped, like it's a lot of time I'm pushing that out to meet kind of the timelines that you were talking about, kind of that end of October into November, kind of later time frame. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of art to it. And you kind of alluded to that.
And then similar with trying to get, a cool season grass sprayed in October. If it's a very specific contract scenario, but I've run into it 3 times already. That exact same thing where they're starting their contract in October, they have a cool season grass of some sort in the field that needs to be taken off, and just trying to fit all that work into those timeframes. It's really tough. And I'm open to other suggestions on how to get that done. Whether it's I don't know, with tilling it in the fall right away and then just do sprayings in the spring. I don't know.
Yeah. My quick thoughts on that are if you can get a fall chemical and a follow-up spring chemical, you're doing pretty good. But that October 1st timeline, it might be questionable.
Mhm.
Just sometimes it doesn't fit into that 12-month window that we're given.
Yeah.
and so those should hopefully be dealt with on a case-by-case scenario. And hopefully prior to that October 1st kind of contract start, we're having conversations with that client and we're not just jamming them in.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I walked into the middle of of all 3 of these that now need to be planted in the next 2 months, but we're working on them. We're trying.
Yeah. Brock, I'm curious, in the cost share list, we have opportunities for temporary cover or companion crop kind of payments and whatnot. Wondering if you have experience with those, if you'd want to speak to kind of timing of planting some of those, like oats, for example. If you have thoughts.
I don't have a ton of experience with that. I back when I was doing the installations, we would do it on some of them. Essentially just to try to keep some of the weed pressure out if we thought it was going to be a while. But I don't have a ton of experience with that. I would let someone else take that one.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a good one to open up to the crowd. If there's PTs out there that have liked adding the companion crops or temporary covers, and maybe we even need to define the difference between the 2 of them. But if there's anybody out there that uses those, if you want to jump on and just kind of say when and where you use them, or if you just defer to biologists and NRCS for those recommendations. All right, we got a shy group. Feel free to type it into the chat. Amy or Britta, do either of you want to comment on when kind of you like to use them?
Yeah, I can. I think that generally I'm looking at slope. Of course, down here in the driftless, like everything has slope. And it kind of depends too on, I guess, what the landowner wants. But I think generally if there's a more steep slope that we're planting into, I feel like I just like to use it for just a little bit of, something to hold on to the soil. I think I've kind of heard varying everyone's opinion, right? For like some people feel that the oats aren't really competing with the weeds that much and actually are detrimental in some ways to like our are competing with the planting that we do. But I also think that I've heard too where people are happy because with landowners that when those oats are just in getting going, it's kind of a good indicator of when to mow for the first time. So I think it kind of depends on what the landowner really wants. And again, for me, mostly it's like a slope thing.
So kind of erosion control, and you were talking specifically about companion crops in that situation.
Yep.
Right, Britta?
Sorry. Yes. Oats as a companion crop. Yep.
Yeah. And so maybe just for the purpose of this conversation, like differentiating between companion crop and temporary cover. So companion crop, what Britta was talking about, is mixing like a bushel of oats in, which is our typical recommendation, with either a cool season or warm season grass seed mix. The temporary cover would be used in a situation where you can't hit one of those planting windows and you want to plant almost a cover crop to then terminate that temporary cover to get you into one of those planting windows that Rock was talking about. I think we use companion crops a lot. I don't think we use temporary cover all that much. Amy, did you have any other thoughts, or do you have a preference of when you like to use them?
We had to use it once in a planting because they had atrazines, which has an 18-month residual, so we had to plant sorghum in there. Otherwise, the cover wasn't going to come up because of the residual herbicide. But yeah, otherwise just something to plant in that window if they can't get it in during that timeline, just so something's growing and deter the weeds that would come up otherwise.
Great example. I've been putting oats at a bushel an acre in almost all my plantings, just because it gives, especially on warm season mixes, just because it gives that initial, like it's something green and growing, giving that client confidence that they actually planted something. So it's
Heck
more
yeah,
the
that
social
makes
science
sense. Yeah.
side of things. And then it also gives a good marker as to like when they can think about mowing in the first year. And I guess I should further clarify that that's only for spring plantings. If we're going to plant it in the fall, like that oats will just sit in the ground and probably rot before it germinates. So we typically don't put it in then.
If you use just using like adding a bunch of one of the warm season rye to act sort of as a cover crop, you know, I've talked about that with on a couple of projects of just bumping up the Canada or Virginia wild rye to sort of play that role, but also have natives in there. Do they come up early enough to kind of play that role of keeping out weed pressure or keeping down weed pressure anyway?
I haven't played around with it all that much. I know I included it in a bunch of my mixes. It's not as aggressive as oats, I guess is my quick thought. Other questions out there?
Hey guys, it's Luke. Question I get from folks who don't want to use herbicide is you know, how to take care of prep weed pressure, you know, without using an herbicide, doing it organically. And I don't know if I've ever come up with a good answer for them, especially when cool season grasses are the main concern. Any thoughts on that? Any recommendations you have to go the organic route?
Wish
I'm
them
guessing
good
this
luck.
isn't like, yeah, I'm guessing this isn't like a half-acre planting you're talking about here.
Well, even if say it was, maybe it's real small scale, we get a fair number of those. You
Some of the
think it's
stuff
more
I've heard,
manageable?
yeah, some of the stuff I've heard for the real small scale stuff is like solarization, covering it with a clear plastic, essentially just like baking out the the plants. Or if it's really small, I've heard the cardboard lasagna method. You put a bunch of cardboard down, and then then soak it, and then cover
Mm-hmm.
that in mulch, and then plant straight through your cardboard. Again, not really feasible for a 5 acre 5 acre
Yeah.
field, but those are the only things I've ever heard of. The only other thing I can think offhand would just be to plan on burning the heck out of it, like every mid spring.
I think the only example that I know, but I don't have a good example of like me personally doing it. I've just either read or like heard about it, is using like buckwheat as a smother crop to set that up. You know, you'd have to plant it at a really high rate, and then you're just trying to smother out your weeds, and then you take that smother crop off. But yeah, I don't have a great example other than that.
There are also organic herbicides that you can use. Like they do make them for organic farming. So that's also a good, you can like look it up on Google and it'll pop up.
All right. Thank you.
CP1s are a good consideration in those sites too. Tillage with a CP1 planting early can be effective at controlling some of those weeds. I would, if you're going warm season, Luke, I would also consider maybe a different program other than CRP. just because some of the requirements that they're going to be held to are a little higher, and we can almost guarantee it won't work as well as the practices we know with herbicides. So consider some of the other programs that have more flexibility.
Good points. Thank you.
All right, so we're at 3 o'clock. We'll stop the recording here in a second and let everybody go. This kind of was the last planned webinar that we had. I appreciate those of you that filled out the survey, though. We got some really good responses and some really good energy to continue these talks going forward. I think what we've all kind of agreed is we're going to take a little bit of a break to get through crop reporting and some of the field work that our pheasant scrubber staff have to take care of. But what we'll do is we'll pick this back up kind of late summer. Ian was planning some field days around the state, so we'll probably pair up with him to provide some of this content, but out in the field as a kickoff then for kind of our fall and winter webinar series that we'll pick back up. So stay tuned for more information on that. And again, thanks for keeping the attendance high on these webinars and appreciating the content. So with that, thanks everybody.